We have today gathered an august panel to talk about a topic that everybody's been very much talking about, which is art as a profession. And as we all know, I think things are very thrown to the winds in many ways about how you make a living doing comics, or how the different strategies are involved in doing art and staying true to it and still making some money. So we have some great people here who all have different strategies towards that goal. And I will introduce them briefly, and then perhaps they could talk a little bit more about themselves. So first we have our guest Boulet, a French cartoonist of amazing renown and great 24-hour comics, amazingly prolific. Next to him we have George Rohac, who is from Oni Press. He's our operations manager, as well as Benign Kingdom, the publishing imprint, which he'll explain more what that is. Judy Hansen from the Hansen Literary Agency to talk to us about the book business and contracts. And finally, we have Micah Spivak from the Scott Eater Gallery, which talk about the art market a little bit. But why don't I briefly talked about it? But can you I'll just start down the line a little bit and just talk a little bit about yourself and you know, maybe a little bit about how you got into the profession you're in. Just briefly set the scene. So.
Okay, me?
Yes.
Oh, the non-speaking yes. English guy have to start. Great. Okay.
You'll be charmed, don't worry.
Yeah, I was told to keep my French accent. So what do we want to know? How I started to work?
How long have you been doing comics? And what made you want to pursue comics?
Almost 15 years now. Started when I was still a student in France, just because I had to earn money. I started to participate to a lot of contests, and participating a lot of contests, I finally drew some attention to me from publishers, and there was a magazine starting. They asked me to participate, and so I started with doing strips in newspaper, and then having my own series, my own albums. And I really started to live with my comics when I started my webcomic in 2004. And then there were books derivated from this series in the internet.
Mm-hmm. So you have kind of followed the basic path that so many do of publishing for free on the web and then putting out in print and
yeah.
buying the books?
But I started with regular comics. Mm-hmm. The internet went afterward.
Mm-hmm. So, George, you want to talk a little bit about what you do? Or?
Sure. I'm Director of Business Development at Oni, so I handle weird kind of outside market projects. I work a lot with like Double Fine and Penny Arcade for that stuff. Previously, I was the operations director, so I was managing scheduling, print buying, all this macro kind of things. I also do on the side, I help run Benign Kingdom, the art book publishing company that Yuko Ota, Becky Drysdale, Evan Dom, Nath Panagaria, Frank Gibson, and Casey Green founded last year. And that's just, putting out art books, things like that. I help them with kind of through the Kickstarter process and things like that. And on the side, I sometimes help people with Kickstarter projects, and that's about it.
Judy?
Well, I'm a literary agent. I started in the book business some years ago, in the trade book business, working with houses like Random House, Simon & Schuster. Before that, I'd been a publisher of an alternative newspaper in Wisconsin. And then when we moved to New York, I got into the book business. And from the book business, I realized that I'd rather be on the other side, representing the creators and the writers, rather than the organizations, the publishers. So after working for some major trade houses, I went to work for a comics publisher for several years, Kitchen Sink Press, before it went under. And then I moved to Australia, and that is where I set up my literary agency, was when I was living in Sydney. And I've been doing my literary agency since then.
Hi. I'm with the Scott Eater Gallery in Brooklyn. We do art gallery exhibits with the cartoonists and comic book artists. That's exclusively. we try to promote artists who aren't necessarily unknowns in comics, but who might not be well known outside of that. So we try to.
Who are some of the artists that you've had there recently?
We've done shows with Drew Friedman and Tony Millionaire and Peter Bagg and Jeffrey Brown, Jack Davis.
So I'm going to ask you all to talk about how your business has changed in the last year, or if there have been trends or things that you've noticed, like just the overall outlook in the past year. And I'll go in reverse order, so I'll throw Micah right in the spotlight there. So, how have things been in the past year for you?
Good. The art sales are strong. Surprisingly so. Surprisingly not. Even during the recession, we didn't feel too much of a hit on sales. But we have Scott's been doing this for a long time, so he's got a sort of a regular client base, and we know he's pretty good about getting things out there. And we do like the big comic shows. We set up at big shows, and Scott, he does shows in Europe. The art we sell is not necessarily as popular here as it is there. That we deal with the indie cartoonists and stuff that's more appreciated outside of America.
Right.
So other we have a lot of customers spending lots of money coming out of the East, in China and in Singapore. We're trying to expand, worldwide more. That's sort of what we've noticed over the past few years. More of our customers are outside of America than they had been before.
No, there has been a lot of talk about how the art world in general has been skyrocketing,
Sure.
the prices. How does that affect what you do?
It makes it harder to get new things. Even in comics, certain artists that we used to be able to bring art in more regularly, it's almost impossible.
Really?
Mobius and Jack Kirby, even. It's hard to get something that you're going to make a profit on when you're paying, exorbitant prices. But we try to deal directly with the artists as much as possible. I'd rather, we'd rather support them.
Right. Judy.
Well, this has been an interesting year because with the demise of Borders, we're finally working through the Borders effect, which means that there is only one major trade book retailer, which is with retail stores, is Barnes & Noble. You have others like Books A Million, but primarily Books. Barnes & Noble is the big retailer. Online, of course, it's Amazon. So from the trade book distribution side, last year was a little glitchy because it was unclear what the Borders effect. Borders had been very supportive of graphic novels, and it was unclear what the fallout from their demise was actually going to be. I think it's provided clarity this last year because now publishers can pretty much estimate their initial orders in a way that they couldn't the year before. Other channels of distribution, when you talk about the direct market, I think that's picked up. I think you're seeing a stronger direct market sale this last year. I would expect that to continue. I think digital is going to be very interesting. I'm very bullish long term. I think we're right now still in this glitch period. And until we have devices that have really great resolution, and the term I use is $100 iPads, I think the Kindle and the Nook still leave a lot to be desired when it comes to viewing of comics. But we need a bigger screen, lighter weight, better resolution when we have those very inexpensive devices. I think we're going to see a huge uptick in the demand for comics format, and both on material that would be suited for an institutional market as well as for a consumer and an entertainment market. Indie comics, I think, are going to see a boom when we get there. I don't see that happening in the next year, but I'm a couple years down the line, I think that's the case. With regard to contracts, I've seen publishers retrenching and trying to retain more rights than they have in the past, partly because they don't understand where the demarcation is for digital and film. Now I see language in contracts from publishers where arguably the language they're including is for animation rights, even though they explicitly say, no, we're not taking film TV rights. Nevertheless, the net effect when you go to Warner Brothers and try and negotiate a film or an animation deal, they're screaming and saying, wait a minute, these are traditional film TV rights. Why does the book publisher have them? Mm-hmm. So we're in sort of a glitch period there in terms of the footing for film, TV, and also webisode deals. You know, there are companies who are trying to do these 2 to 10 minute webisodes based on comics. The kinds of contracts that I've seen relating to those deals have been overreaching and low paying. And if you already have a book deal with a publisher, there's an intersection there that has yet to be really worked out. So you really have to look at your contracts much more carefully, and it's much harder negotiating those right now.
So again, it's a period of nobody really knows where it's going.
And that's why, you know, I think being professional and art as a profession, I think is going to be a real important in the next couple of years for people to take that attitude.
Yeah. George.
All right. Sorry. One, if my voice is bad, I'm getting over being ill. But okay. So I'm always going to have 2 answers for things because I come at it from 2 different angles. So on the side with Oni, this past year has been really good. I mean, Oni's basically had like a steady kind of climb. Like we kept it. You know, anytime we've had a big success, we haven't then like been overzealous and like, you know, just blown money. We've strategically invested. So I mean, like that's why, you know, over the past 2.5 years now, we, you know, switched everything over, and we're one of the only publishers that's put everything out on time upon solicitation. So, which I feel really bad that is a thing that I have to be proud of. But so I mean, in terms of sales and things like that, yeah, I totally agree with Judy. Like, you know, this year in particular, like sales have been up like a fair percentage over you know what they have been. And so I mean, everything's really solid, and I mean, in terms of Roni, it's all really good. Switching over to Benign and stuff. So switching over to the digital thing. So Benign Kingdom, in case you don't know what it is, it's an art book publisher that is run by a bunch of the people I mentioned, that they all have webcomics and things online, and then also work in print as well. So they all had these huge fan bases. They wanted to do these little art books, and you know, it was just an idea, and we threw it together, and it went up in January of last year and was really well received. So we're like, why don't we continue doing this for everyone's friends? And yeah, I mean, it went above and kind of beyond what we thought it was going to. So what turned into be, you know, something that we were potentially just going to have as a kind of a one-off, or maybe only an annual thing. Now it's basically we're plotting to do, you know, 2 to 4 like seasons of things a year, and the, you know, reception has been really, really great. And you know, we're now doing shows with it where previously we were like, oh, maybe we'll do that in 2 years afterwards. So it's been really, really good for that as well. So
for me, really 2 different things. My personal course went incredibly well. I've been invited to New York, for example, things like that. But the general situation of comic books in France is very different. So it's kind of a paradox, because if you ask me how goes my work, I would tell you it's fantastic, it's great, but it's like interviewing a winner of the lottery and telling him how is economy. Yeah, it's great for me. So I'm not really a good example, because I had a lot of luck. My webcomics made me quickly famous in France, and so I sold a lot of books. But the general situation in France is very different, because we are the 10 last year were a period of deeper and deeper crisis in the world of the comic books, because there were a huge boom of comics books in the beginning of the 2000s. So publishers started to do more and more books. So we had a lot of production, too much production. So the price paid to the author fell down. And so now it's kind of a paradox. It's never been easier in France to publish a book, because there are a lot of publishers. So you just have to pick, and you can try 20 or 30 publishers, and finally you will find someone to publish your book, but you will be paid scandalous low price. It's incredible. When I started to do comic books, it was in 2001, and the typical price for a young author who will work 9 months on an album was like you could be paid 10,000 euros for the whole album. So you could live for 1 year just doing one album. Now, if you have 3,000, you are very, very lucky for a first album. It became very, very. The price were divided by like 3 or sometimes even more.
Wow. Just like
so
here.
yeah, and we had this. You were talking about the digital future of comics, and in France it's very complicated at the moment because a lot of people are getting into that. There are a lot of new initiatives. People doing collective works, doing self-published stuff. So it's great. There are a lot of new things. But with the publishers, the situation is completely blocked. We are stuck because the publisher, when all the internet came down to them with the new tablets and people wanted to read comics on tablets, they just proposed, shitty PFD files to read, or they wanted to adapt our comic books for phones. So they were cutting panels after panel, and you would read like that, and of course nobody will buy it. And they wanted to give the author the exact same percentage. So you would tell for an author you will have, let's say, 10%, and when they will sell your book online, they won't have to print it, they won't have to ship it, and you still have 10% and the price is the same. So I asked my publisher, I had a book published in digital way, and I asked them, why is book so expensive? It's stupid. The original price is like 17 euros, and the price online was like 12 euros. This is ridiculous. Nobody is going to buy that. And they told me, we don't want your book to look cheap, because it's not good for your image. And I said, screw that. And I told my followers, don't buy my book online, please.
Oh, you must have been popular after that happened, right? Your publisher was, we love you, dude. Yeah.
But the author and friends are starting to regroup. We have created a syndicate to talk, because they are a syndicate of publishers, and they are a lot more powerful than we are. And it's very difficult to regroup the author, because everybody is in his house minding his own business, doing his comics in his basement, seeing no one for months. And so it's very hard to federate them. And now it's starting to get somewhere. So, but we stopped the negotiation on the digital publishing because we were going nowhere. It was ridiculous, actually. One of my publishers asked me, gave me a contract for my books, adaptation of my website, and he was asking me for the digital rights. Like, I made the website, I made it become famous, and now I was supposed to give him the rights, and I had to pay him to publish my work. It was incredible, and people were, why? Telling my publisher, why are you asking that? It's ridiculous, it's stupid. And he said, well, you could always try. This is the situation in France.
Wow. Well, George, why don't you, Boulet was just talking about how hard it is to get the artists, sitting in the basement, but you've gotten to do just that. So, or they got themselves. Talk a little bit about banding together in this market.
Really? I mean, the kind of focus is just that it's, a lot of people who, everyone I kind of work with, outside of Oni and even in Oni, it's, creators are very impassioned about doing their work. And so it just started as a little thing. The whole reason, I'll tell the story as to how Benign came together, was that Evan Dom and Becky Drysdale had been doing little art books, like print on demand through Kablam, to buy them and then sell them at shows. And they really didn't like the quality, but, it was one of those things where they didn't know how to, what else to do. And Yuka wanted to do some, and Casey had been talking to them about it as well. And just after a show, I kind of, in my head, whenever all of them were doing it, I'm like, I just did the quick fuzzy math in my head for, like print run sizes, that sort of thing. And I'm like, have you guys thought about going to like larger sizes and doing like, at traditional printers? They're like, well, we don't know how much we would do with that. And so we just started spitballing ideas over lunch. And we're like, no, we think we can make this work, especially if we all kind of group together. Because we realized, like, independently, if any individual person tried to kind of, do something like that on their own, it might not be successful. Also, then that individual person has to deal with thousands of books. That's not very convenient for them, on top of, whatever their main staple stock is for essentially what's a side thing on their table. So it was like, all right, well, if we just all put it under one umbrella, then you're pooling everyone's kind of like fan bases and everything, and everyone then gets excited because then a lot of people that they like are working together on something as well. So, it's just a win for everyone. So yeah, I mean, we sat down, we started that right after New York Comic Con of 2011. And then it was just, after that, we just had, meetings kind of like about every month and kind of just talk through things like, hey, well, how are we going to do this? What do we think about this? What do we think about, like, when do we want to kind of launch this thing? How do we want to kind of like set things up on the business side? And then, we eventually launched it, and it went crazy. And after that, we had a bunch of meetings like right in succession after it went so well, and we were like, all right, well, obviously people like this, and how do we help all of our other like creator friends like do this too? And then that just kind of ran with it. So
basically, you just you did it. I mean, let's just. I mean, the elephant in the room is everything is free now on the internet, as you're talking about. So, I mean, and I'll just throw this open to the panel. Suppose you are starting out now as an artist, as a creator, looking to make a career and a profession, and make some money, buy some ramen out of this. I mean, what would you say? What would you say is a path? What is the path to becoming professional now?
I can give you a few initial tips. First of all, if you're going to become a professional, then you have to have the right attitude, which is deadlines, right? You have to meet your deadlines. And it doesn't matter what the deadline is. I've had clients where deadlines have been 5 years down the road, but they have committed that they will be producing and submitting the work 5 years from that time, and it'll be finished so that the publisher can plan. So you have to look at the fact that it's not just you in your own little space if you're trying to go out into the bigger marketplace. I mean, it's one thing if it's you and you're self-publishing and you're going to sell it at your table at little indie comics conventions. But if the fact of the matter is you want to open up your work to different channels of distribution, which is really what we're talking about, channels of distribution, you need to understand that other organizations have a process for getting work to market, and that you need to work within those parameters to get your work out there through these different channels of distribution. Now, the direct market has a different system than the trade book market. What's called the non-traditional markets, alternative stores, for example, getting books into Bed Bath & Beyond or Urban Outfitters or stationery stores, which can be great outlets for comics with the appropriate material, but they also work on a certain timeline. If you're talking about licensing, typically companies, calendar companies, card companies, poster companies, they're working on a much longer timeline than you might have any clue about. So the first thing is you need to find out what it is that channel of distribution needs in terms of a delivery and what their process is for getting it to market, and then back out and figure out what your delivery timetable is going to be and what's realistic. So I find that even if you're talking about a longer timeline than they might like, as long as you're committed and it's clear to everyone contractually what that is, that you can move forward and the relations are good. Mm-hmm. So being on time, doing the work that you've committed to. I cannot tell you how many things I've seen on a, quote, pitch that turns into a disaster when people try and actually expand this into what they've committed to, which is maybe a 150 to 200 page graphic novel. Why? Why is it a disaster? Because they hadn't thought it through. So from my point of view is that you do not even go to market with your project if you're going to these other channels of distribution other than your own little self-publishing route unless you've clearly thought out what is the story, who are the characters, what's the story arc. If you're talking about kids comics, you want to find out what are the hooks and what's curriculum based, because institutional sales in the kids market are very important. You want to look at what it is that are you going into fiction or are you trying to do memoir, nonfiction. If that's the case, then you need to look at what is it in terms of memoir. Why do the stories that work really work, right? Not just reportage. This happened to me, that happened to me. Who cares what you want to talk about in your story?
People love that, but you know,
anyway, not on a big. When you're talking about trying to reach 500,000 people, that's very different than trying to reach 1,000 people. I had a conversation last night at dinner with someone, and I asked him, "What's your definition of success in comics?" And he said, "If I get 1,000 people reading my webcomic, then I've succeeded." I said, well, that's great. So you've identified for yourself your level of success. Reaching 1,000 people with your webcomic, I believe you can do that, and you can do that episodically and probably with not a lot of foresight. But if you're talking about adding a few digits onto there so that you're talking about reaching, 100,000 people a month with your comic or 1 million people with your comic, I think you need to have a more strategic approach to it. And also, if you want to go into other channels of distribution, be able to sell your webcomic to a trade book publisher or a comic book publisher, you really need to take into account where you're going with the story and not say, well, I have this idea. The other thing is look at what is, if you're going to be a professional, what's out in the marketplace. Okay, what's not selling and what is selling. That doesn't mean that you should only follow the trends. But you want to analyze what's out there and how does that fit into your vision. There has to be some sensitivity to if your personal goal is I want to sell 500,000 copies of a comic in a year. Well, if you're doing some historical little book about maybe I don't know, and you're using animals as the characters rather than real people, and it's like a quirky little story, maybe you'll do it and present it in a creative way, but the odds are that that's going to be a little smaller project than something that may be more, in today's market, that might be more contemporary.
Right. Micah, let me ask you. I mean, what should artists, think about in terms of original art? I mean, everybody's doing digital stuff now. Does that mean there's less original art? Or?
In some cases.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. I mean, this is all, so far removed from what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But and not uninteresting.
Yeah.
It's like we kind of get into, we get the artists after they've sort of developed a name for themselves. Because it's hard to sell art by people that nobody's ever heard of.
Do you try to tell your artists, if they're doing a book, to not sell the book and keep it as a whole?
Not necessarily. It's hard for us to sell books as complete. Because you're basically taking out anybody who can't afford the whole book. We have some like Jeffrey Brown draws his books in sketchbooks, and sometimes he doesn't separate them. Mm-hmm. It's hard to sell a complete book in a sketchbook. It's cool. But and there are books that we buy complete. There are artists where we buy the artwork before it's created, so that they can live while they're creating it. Which is the sad reality of what I think are some very exceptional cartoonists, that they have to do that. But we don't keep the books together at that point. It'd be impossible. We have people approach us all the time who haven't gotten to that level where their art is really saleable. Mm-hmm. And I say basically keep your art until you're at that point, because you don't want to give it away. And you're better off holding on to it, then you don't want to sell your art for $10, $15 a page because that's all you can get for it. You keep it, and hopefully you develop further along, and the more people read your books, the more people are interested in buying the art from it, and then we're more interested in buying it from you.
How do awards impact your sales?
It's hard. Doesn't hurt, because it creates awareness.
Right, but does it make a big difference in terms of price and movement?
No, I don't think so. Not so much. I mean, we try to push the artists that we like. It's what separates us from the other comic book art dealers, because we don't focus on mainstream comic book art. And if somebody wants to buy a Mackey's strip or something like that, they know we have them, and the other guys don't.
Do you do any merchandising? Do you prints or?
We do prints for gallery shows. For when we do a show, we try to always do a print. Partly because I like making prints, and I know from going to gallery shows that a lot of people can't afford the originals, and you can have a print for $30 or $40. That's people are more likely to buy that because they don't have however many hundreds or thousands of dollars that the originals cost. And I like prints. So.
George, you have also worked on Kickstarter with some webcomics, correct?
Yeah.
Didn't you do the one with Homestuck?
Yeah. I also work for Wild Pumpkin Studios, the Homestuck company. So I don't like sleep. Yeah, no.
Three Lives of George. Yeah.
Let's see. Off the top of my head, I'm gonna forget some, and I apologize to the people who I'm forgetting. Awkward Zombie, Cucumber Quest, Johnny Wonder Book Starter, Rice Boy, Order of Tales, Tiny Kitten Teeth, the Homestuck video game Kickstarter.
And how much money did that make?
2.4 million.
Right.
Where that's rounded up. That's the bulk. Collectively, I think I'm up to like 24 Kickstarters I've assisted on, and I'm up to a total, if you cobble them all together, of like 3. Of last time I did the math was like 3.6. So it's, and I mean that's only in the last that's in the last year and a half. So that's why I'm like really excited. Like right now, I feel like it's a really good time in comics, and I think like one of the like Judy made amazing points in that you have to be professional when working with any outside entity, because whenever you're going to be working on your comics, and that's why I encourage like working with a publisher. Working with a publisher is a good thing because you can keep working on your own for a while, but you might not develop some of the professional techniques that are really going to help you kind of excel creatively and professionally even more until you work with a publisher, work with an editor, work with an agent, work with people who are going to be like, okay, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Oh, here, hit these deadlines, do these things. So that's Kickstarter in a way has some of that because you are fairly deadline based. I mean, there's no one who is ultimately culpable except for you if things go wrong afterwards. But I mean, everyone that I work with, before projects start, I kind of go through everything with them. We talk, they have an idea, and it's like, all right, well, if we're going to do X, Y, and Z, it's going to be this much of a time investment for you. It's going to potentially cost this much money. Are you able to do this? And then afterwards, whenever rewards go well, Cucumber Quest was an example of it where Gigi did not believe that she was going to have that much of a reaction, that people were going to be that excited for Cucumber Quest. But once it got to a certain point, she was like, I have no idea what to do for like incentives anymore, and we've blown through a lot of them. And I'm like, okay. And I just tossed out her, I'm like, would you like to do your comic full time? And she was like, that would be amazing. I'm like, okay, look at your budget. Like, go ahead and do like a budget. How much do you need to live? Like rent, everything, and then factor in taxes, and get back to me. And she did all that, and she gave me some numbers, and I'm like, okay, well then why don't we just set some tiers here, and then you'll update the comic more often, and it'll be incremental until you get up to the point where you're essentially working on the comic full time, and then that will be a reward to your fans because then you're able to generate more content because you're not doing freelance jobs and other things, but it's also beneficial to you because then you're getting that money to then work on the thing that you're so in love with. So yeah, I mean, there's like tons of different aspects involved with every little like Kickstarter project. I mean, they're all different. It all depends on what it is. So.
Do you have Kickstarter in France? Is that becoming
Yeah,
a thing yet?
yeah,
What's
it's
going on?
becoming a thing too. More and more people are trying to use that way to have books published, but it's still not as important as it is here. No, we have different issues in France. You were talking about what advice you can give to a young cartoonist in France. The thing we try to tell people who are starting to publish is you are working with a publisher, not for a publisher. And you have to keep this relationship like that. And you can't, because a lot of people want so desperately to publish something, they are willing to accept almost anything. And the stories I was telling earlier about some publisher telling about the rights, keeping the rights, and things like that. It can happen, but if someone is interested in your book, there are big chances that someone else is interested too. The publisher doesn't publish a book just to be nice to you. He thinks he can make money with that. But when you hear young cartoonists, sometimes it's look like that. Oh, I'm so lucky I find a publisher, so I'm not going to be paid much, but it's cool because I'm going to people. This is stupid because he's not doing that because you are nice. He wants to earn money too, so maybe someone else will be willing to earn money too with you and pay you more. And I'm glad I said no to the publisher who was willing to keep the rights for the digital part for him, because then I met another publisher, then another publisher, and they always wanted to make concession, to cut my work, to make a different format what I wanted. And finally, I discussed of it with my actual publisher, Lewis Trondheim, who worked for Delcourt, and we could make the book I wanted and with my condition. It was a bit longer, but I finally have the condition I wanted from the beginning.
No, just one thing that you had mentioned that was really important, I feel, is starting out. A lot of creatives, especially younger people, are very excited to just kind of get exposure and get branding, and it's something that a lot of people say it, but I emphasize it anytime I'm speaking publicly. Do not work for free. Never, ever work for free. Exposure is nothing. You can put things on the internet and it is exposed to the world. So anyone who's saying, oh, it'll be fun and you'll get this exposure. No, they're going to make money off of your work, and that's wrong if you're not making anything in return.
I still get that.
Yeah.
People asking for, like, we have 1,000 visitors each month on our website. It's good for your exposure. Yeah, I have 1 million each month.
Yeah. So
right.
Go to hell.
I'd like to speak to that point because I think this is an excellent point, George. So, especially now in the direct market, we're seeing a lot of comic publishers that are saying, we're not going to give you any money, but we're going to do a profit split, right? Well, my feeling is, okay, if that's the way you're going to go, then tell us what else you're going to get. What's your marketing budget? Are you committing $10,000 to marketing? That's money that we know is actually going to be spent. Are they going to be committing to doing a quality conversion on digital? And you should always insist on approval over conversion on the digital conversion so that you don't run into the problem that Boulet was talking about a crappy conversion. If you say insist on approval on your conversion, or maybe you'll say you'll supply the conversion yourself at X price per page so that they're paying you and then you're managing the quality control. Mm-hmm. But George has an excellent point. Someone, and so does Boulet, someone's going to make money. Obviously, it helps if you have someone who really understands what the going rate is in the market and can get you the best price. And it may not be always the advance. It may be the devil is in the details on all the other royalty structure, the rights splits, the channel of distribution, what the royalties are, because that can vary radically from house to house, and other commitments, like are they going to commit to a marketing budget, which could be seriously, if you were out there marketing your own work, if someone's committing to $10,000 in a marketing budget, that you have to factor that in.
Yeah, and I just throw in my own thing here. Like you just said something all very smart. But I mean, I run my own website also, and when I took it on my own, I did talk to a lot of potential partners, and everybody was like, "Oh, we'll do a revenue share." And after a while, I said, "Why don't I just share with myself? I mean, I'm going to end up with 100% instead of 50%." And, that turned out a lot better. So, yeah, share with yourself. Unless, as Judy says, they're really bringing something to the table that you cannot do, which is often. I mean, just, George, you're an organized fella. I mean.
No, and I mean, like Oni, for an example, I mean, like, that's the thing, is that it's like, the different deals that they work out with people and, what they offer as a publisher, that is all things that you look at. And I mean, and this is another thing Judy had talked about as well, but, read your contract. Like top to bottom, there in every state, you can contact the Bar Association, and there are lawyers that typically have lowered rates for creatives that you can have like a 30-minute consultation. Sometimes even some states and Bar Associations have lawyers that will work for free, and do a free 30-minute consultation. But you can have a contract reviewed that way for free or a reduced rate, and then know what you're getting into. So don't be scared. Don't be scared to talk to a lawyer. Talk to outside people. It is worth it in the long run to protect your creative work. Then kind of just trust that the people that you're working with, who are really cool on the phone and you like a lot, aren't going to suddenly say, "Oh, actually, all these details were this, and we're taking this much money, and oh, actually, this deal where we were going to pay you money, you actually owe us money now for all these things we did," which is things I've seen from other publishers and other media companies. It's very sad.
It's very strange thing. It's like a punishment for us because we like our job. We do something we love, and then it's something funny, something not important. So I have heard that a lot of times. We are short on our budget, so we don't have enough for the graphic part. But if you work, when we are going to make benefits, we will give you your share. This is unimaginable. This is stupid. You won't say to the programmer of your website, we paid the cartoonist, so now we don't have enough money for the code, but do the code for free anyway, and then either you have all the budget and you can pay everyone, or you pay no one. You can tell a part of the working force, you will have your money later. No, you don't give me my money later. You don't have enough money to make your projects if you can't pay me. Yeah. So we have to be very vigilant about that. Never accept to be paid later.
I'd like to follow up on George's comment about finding legal representation, because I think this is really important. Like in any world, there's specialties. You don't want a real estate lawyer reviewing an intellectual property contract, okay? More importantly, especially if you're talking about the channel of distribution, if that lawyer has never negotiated contracts or either a distribution agreement or they've never handled channel of distribution, they're not going to understand how you could negotiate certain royalties depending on the channel of distribution. They're not going to have a clue about that. And that's one of the areas where the right agent can help you in a way that just your run-of-the-mill lawyer isn't going to be able to help you. And so, and I, especially in comics, my recommendation is for people to find someone who has business experience. If you're going to the book business, or you're trying to sell to the book business, who has business experience, not editorial, but business experience in the book business, business experience in the comic industry, because they're two different industries. Or if you're going into doing licensing, someone who has business experience in the licensing industry, because each of these industries have different norms, different rates of what's considered acceptable, and you really want to be tailored in the advice that you're getting to the channel of distribution that you're trying to be selling into.
I want to open it up to questions. I'm not sure how it works here, but is anybody out there? Yeah, you have a mic, or does anyone out there have any questions? Anybody? No? No one wants to know. There we go. Okay. Okay, hold on, we'll get a mic.
This is a question for Judy. I see a lot of adaptations coming out now of literary works like the graphic canon and also complete graphic novels that are adaptations of plays or novels. Some of them very short, some of them quite long, and obviously these can sell both for the popular market and for the educational and markets as well. What are your thoughts on adaptations?
It depends on what you're adapting and what else is going on with regard to that underlying author's work. For example, if you're trying to do something like the graphic canon and your primary audience is going to be institutional sales, you know there's a limit to that. Wrinkle in Time is an example of something that's been on the bestseller list for 20-odd weeks. There was a big event with an anniversary for Madeline D'Engle's work. Macmillan made this a lead title. So here was a graphic adaptation that not only was created by a creator who loved the work, and it came through in the fantastic job that was done on that, but it was also positioned to sell both to the trade and to the consumer market, and so it worked really well. I think it depends on what the underlying material is. I mean, the Hobbit graphic novel. Here's another example.
No, that book came out like 30 years ago.
30 years
And
ago,
it's
okay.
still, it's the only graphic novel ever for Tolkien, right?
Right, exactly. Okay, so it was, Harper had the rights. They relicensed to Del Rey when the first set of the Lord of the Rings movies came out. They did reasonably well. In the deal that I negotiated for Dixon with HarperCollins on that, we were a little limited because he had the Tolkien estate, which was the big gorilla in the room. But those books, that was more of a book that isn't going to have the same shelf life, I don't think. It's going to be very movie tie-in. So when you're talking about adaptations, is it classic literature that is curriculum-based or is classic children's literature? I think that's a better choice. I mean, I've had the other example with a client of mine who adapted The Great Gatsby. Just did it on her own, but the problem, she was able to publish it in Australia and Canada, but the estate, Fitzgerald estate here in the U.S. would not grant permission for that to be published in the U.S., even though we approached Scribner, which was also the publisher of Fitzgerald. They didn't want to have any part of it. So and it was a brilliant adaptation. Neil Gaiman said the year it came out, it was one of the best he'd read that year. So, you have to look at when you're talking about adaptation, do you have the underlying rights? And do you have the cooperation of, be it an estate or an author? Is there some other marketing hook, like an anniversary that's coming out? Who's doing the adaptation? You want an auteur. You don't want to partner a writer and an illustrator. The best adaptations come from auteurs who see the work and have a single vision. That's just my opinion.
Anyone else out there? Any other questions? Yeah? So, yeah.
Hi, this is a question I think for George and Judy, I guess. This is all really fascinating information, and I think it's I'm not quite at the level where I can put it into motion. So I guess my question is, how does one, connect to someone like George, for instance, that is so organized with Kickstarter, or Judy, how you know so much about the distribution and the various types of markets, that leap from I've got an idea, I've got artwork, what do you kind of make that leap into? Now we're talking to publishers, we're in that mix. Does that make any sense at all?
Are you looking for new clients?
Yeah, I mean, basically the same way I feel like finding an agent or finding someone to work with is, something that takes time. I mean, it's not something that you just want to dive into. So, I mean, talking to your peers about, people that they've worked with, business people that they know, and then, getting introductions, that is the best way, and then seriously having a discussion with them. I mean, because you may not have a good working relationship with someone, even though they are doing something similar to what your end goal is. So talking with your peers, and then eventually getting introductions, that's kind of the best way, at least in my opinion. Cold calling is always a little awkward because if you hit the person at the wrong time and they're way too busy or something like that, then it could just get lost. Whereas if someone's current business partner or client is like, hey, this person is really cool, I think you should talk to them, they're much more likely to turn to them and be like, yeah, okay, what do you want to do?
Well, I think George makes a good point. I can tell you for myself, I only take on clients via referral, either from existing clients or from editors. And I take on very, very few clients in any given year. And then it has to be something that I really love. And it also has to be someone that I think I can have a long-term relationship with, because I'm not in it for selling books. I'm in this for career building. And for me, it's all about careers. It's the long term. And it's matchmaking. I mean, for me, the matchmaking part is really the essential. I'll give you an example of one match that I'm very proud of because I think it was the right match. Was bringing Robert Crumb to Norton was the right match for Genesis. In the same way that bringing the Eisner graphic novels to Norton was the right match for that project. I think, you know, there are certain matches and they fit. I think Raina Tegelmeyer was a right match for Scholastic.
But I mean, that is why, you know, you would dream to get a really good agent like Judy. But it's hard. I mean, she has a lot of clients, like Raina and Scott McCloud you work with, and
yeah, I have a long list of good
But
clients.
I mean, I think even maybe a little bit what you were talking about, Boulet. I mean, if you find other artists that you feel comfortable with and you join together. I mean, are you involved in a collective sort of situation? You're talking about that.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you look for people?
I worked with different peoples. I worked with friends to make comics together. I worked with my now publisher, Lewis Trondheim. I worked on 2 albums of Dungeon. But there were, I don't know, publishing adventures, you know. We knew there will be a book behind. But you can also just work for the love of it. So we built a collective with some of my friends. One of them is now illustrator in Brooklyn. She's called Domiti Collardet. Yeah. And we were working back in France on a collective called Chiku Chiku. It was very nice, a pink website with different characters, and we were working on the Exquisite Corpse system. And it became a book, but a lot of time later. At first, it was just people just matching right and wanted to work together. So it can work like that too, but now this is a totally different approach. Because you are an agent, you pick up your. I don't know how to say that in English. I'm sorry, I'm terrible.
Well, I will also look at someone new. I had one of my all-time favorite new clients just came to me out of the blue, and someone said, "Judy, just read this. Do me a favor and just read this." And I did, and I was like, "Oh, this is so smart," and I just loved it. But it was another client. They weren't trying to sell me on this person. It's just, this is good material. You have to read it. And I did, and I called them up, and I said, you know what? I really like what you have here, and if it were me, I would do it a little differently. Do you want to talk about that? And we did, and they've had a multi-book deal. But it was someone coming to me with something, you just have to read it. It's so good. So that happens too.
Right. Was it a web comic?
No.
First? No. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Anybody else out there? Any questions? Yeah, in the back. There we go.
How do you guys feel about the model in terms of long-term sustainability, about publishing for free online with an eye towards like going to a Kickstarter or just then going to print or Comixology or something like that, but as a sort of sustainable business model, and also seems to be what Mark Waid might be doing with Thrillbent, in the long term, is putting a lot of stuff out there for free, then hopefully going to print, and he's already on Comixology.
We had a lot of discussion about that because for the system to publish for free and then print, in France we had this problem because a lot of people started to think that internet was the best way to be published. So a lot of people were opening websites, blogs, and were wondering why they weren't published yet. They would send their comics to publishers saying, I have 2,000 followers each day, so publish me. And the publisher was like, no, your work is ugly. And but it was very difficult for them to understand that fame and quality are two different things, and the internet is not necessarily the best way to be published. It's just a way to be noticed, but it's not the royal lane to be a comic star, you know. So in France we have, like, I don't really remember, but I think it's 6,000 books published every year, and books from an internet publication are like, I don't know, maybe 50 every year, possibly more, but not really big success. So it can be very deceiving, you know, because your fame on internet can make you think that everybody knows you and everybody will publish and buy your book, but it's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I mean, like, coming from all the people that I work with, I mean, for example, just this is a test. How many people in this room read or know about Homestuck? Hands. All right. Okay. Okay. Now, here's what I'm going to say. Homestuck gets between 1.5 and 2.5 million unique visitors a day. So, I want to say maybe like a fifth of this room raised their hands. So, I mean, that's a good kind of example of what you just said about how, you know, just because you're really, really big doesn't mean that it's going to equal to the general, the mass populace fame. People are finding you that they're obviously already going to be keyed to or engaged to the type of work that you're doing. So, I mean, in my opinion, I've been reading comics online since I was 10, whenever I first got the internet. And, you know, I really feel like that it's a good avenue for a lot of people to start. A lot of the people who have really long form comics that have been up for a number of years since, like, you know, whenever a lot of people started doing it in, like, the late 90s and early aughts, you know, they were people who started it whenever they were in college. It was a throwaway strip for them, or it was something just like fun on the side. So naturally, like you said, it wouldn't be something that a publisher would necessarily be after to pick up because the early stuff's going to be rough and things like that. So it's kind of a toss-up. I mean, Judy had mentioned if you want to approach a publisher, then have a plan whenever you start the work. Go, okay, I'm going to start this work. I'm going to put it out online for free because I really love it and I want to do it. And right now I'm just not in a headspace, or I'm not, for whatever reason, out to shop at true publishers. But I want to work on it and I want to do it and I want to expose it to an audience. But if you have that plan and you've laid that sort of thing out, whenever you go to approach publishers and if you've kept your quality like consistent, then they'll be much more likely to be like, oh yeah, no, I want that. And regardless as to what your following may be. But whenever you have those followers that you do gain, I mean, you can tap into them and do things like, you know, self-publishing and selling to them direct. But the thing you always have to remember is if you're printing offset books, if you're printing like in large volume, you've got to store those. You've got to find some way to then fulfill them. And that's, you know, lots of other people that you then have to work with. So.
I think, I mean, there's many different ways now. I mean, it's fascinating that there is, you know, a Homestuck that exists and is so amazingly popular, and yet it is so outside of what is what is known. I mean, there's no Random House behind Homestuck. There is no big company, and yet it's huge. So. Anyway, we can talk about this all day, and we probably will, but I think we're out of time, unfortunately. So thank you all for coming. Thank you so much to our wonderful panel. We take those comments.